Hey folks, Steve here with another End of Empire video. We are going to be doing 1778 in this video. I've already kind of gotten started because the first turn of the year is a winter turn. There wasn't a whole lot that went on. Um, really minimal progress, a lack of activation. You'll notice a leader difference here. Um, the British Pride, because this leader is so highly ranked at a 7, what we found was that the highest rated British leader in the colonies right now is Burgoyne, because Clinton is still captured. We had to get rid of him, but we had a spare British general that we could send down here to command the force, so we have that. They failed to take Charleston, which was important because now it is spring, about to start the spring turn, and the Americans have gotten a lot of replenishments. So while this is still a potent, dangerous force of Germans, they have taken various step losses, and yeah, it's going to be a little tricky for them. Though their native allies are starting to finally come on in force in the south, and this is going to help them. The wilderness is going to be an issue, but at least it gives them some positioning to tie down reinforcement hexes for the Americans. So a southern effort is still making some level of progress. Further along, you can kind of see how everything is still relatively static. I think the important thing is the British still control a great number of. And actually, this is. I need to look at this for a second. He comes off the board. He should have left, and then this guy shows up out of supply, but he still shows up again. The British are holding a number of important ports, which is going to continue to make things difficult for the Americans in the long run. So I think principally the Americans need to focus on trying to free some of the ports, do what they can there. Otherwise, try to attrit the British down, because at the end of this spring turn, we're going to have French West Indies, the West Indies withdrawal due to French entry, and I'm still not exactly sure how this is going to play out. But very generally, it's a basic setup. We are also going to have an auto combat because of a boxed entry number unit. That could see the liberation of Portsmouth. That would be convenient. But it's really just going to come down to, what can any of the sides really do at this point. And I think, again, the path to victory for the British is causing American collapse. I don't foresee us achieving a conquering victory by restoring British rule. They have to go for anarchy, I guess. So we'll play through the spring turn. I think it'll be important to see just kind of where the lay of the land is. And the British forces in New York did get a nice bit of replacements due to control of New York. That's enabling them to project some additional force on the map. We're probably going to see some additional port captures, or at least attempted port captures, here in the near term, depending on how the activation die rolls go. So, all right, guys, I'll go play through that, and we'll come back for the beginning of summer 1778. Okay, here we are after the spring turn of 1778, and there were some minor campaign actions, but largely nothing too crazy. But I think the significant thing here is the impact of the withdrawal is heavily felt on the British. So here's how it all kind of shook out. In the South, this stack failed to activate, and then the leader that we had put there, I didn't even realize, was actually one of the British leaders that has to be withdrawn for the West Indies withdrawal. So now we have this big stack of Prussians, Haitians, Germans, that don't have a leader, so it's going to be hard to activate. They're still a potent force, but we're going to need to rearrange a leader somehow, and the British all of a sudden find themselves very low on leaders, so that's going to be a major problem. We did have some natives who had run down. I don't know, is natives a good term? It feels like maybe I shouldn't use the word natives. Native Americans came down and raided Georgetown, though we did clear it with this 30 movement activating cavalry that came down and swept some Native Americans away. Though you can see, these units are starting to kind of push up a little bit. Um, and ultimately they're in supply via overseas supply through the rivers, except maybe this guy. This guy actually might have some trouble when winter comes, but we'll probably resolve that one way or another. So Americans kind of holding out well there in the just barely mid-Atlantic states. We had some repeated attacks to relieve Alexandria, and eventually we had to pull in Washington. And he did succeed in pushing the stack out of Alexandria, so now we have a port rated marker there, and had pushed them even back, retreating. Uh, and then the leader that was there also got withdrawn for the West Indies withdrawal. We still have Cornwallis hanging out in Baltimore. I don't see that changing anytime soon, at least for the moment. We still have a few scattered British units that are kind of sitting outside of Philadelphia, but Philadelphia remains a big old stack there that doesn't seem like it's going to. It's fine to sit tight for now, though with the British starting to be weakened, they may spring out of there and start smashing some remnants. The forces that are near New York still retain control over most of it. They are dug in a little bit to try to just hold on to this main site. Um, and then further east, the Americans have via, what is this guy? DeKalb, who's a pretty good leader. He came down, gathered up some units, and managed to make a big play for New London and liberated it, forced these units that were left behind to garrison to retreat. So now we have a port rated marker. We do have the British in control of Newport and Providence in Rhode Island. So Burgoyne is there. There was a leader here, but he was withdrawn for West Indies withdrawal. But there's enough units here that they could probably just sit in Newport and not feel too bad about it. But it does pressure Burgoyne to do something to try to take control. And then over here, the British remain in control of Maine, New Hampshire's port, at least. And then the Americans are still kind of stuck near Boston, not able to do much more. I guess I need to withdraw this militia, but I'm just trying to put it there so I don't forget about it. And everything else is relatively quiet. We lost other leaders up here. So there's just it's kind of worked out that it's really just a quiet set of events, or quite a crazy set of events, I should say. I'm sorry, I screwed that up. And the Morgan's rifles are now maybe they have muskets. I can't tell. They've been pushing Brant back because Brant's just unwilling to be involved because Morgan's rifles have offensive ambush factors. They can't help it be pushed back a little bit. So then at the end of the turn, right, we had this big withdrawal of units, and this is what's left over. So the way I read it, we had a case where some of the withdrawal. Let's see, I'll show you. These Marine units, if they were eliminated, need to be substituted. And so we had to remove some steps of other British regulars on the map to kind of make up for this. And then we withdrew a whole bunch. So these are the ones I withdrew. They had to withdraw at least 18 steps. And we did do that. The British tried to target units that were already beat up to kind of keep them from being eliminated. I don't know if I don't know how fair that is, if they can just do that, but they did that. And so we're still sitting at 30 British regular steps removed across the whole game, and then these withdrawn units don't count. If we couldn't withdraw enough units for whatever reason, or if there was something goofy there, we would have had Lord North's government fall. But I believe we're in a case where Lord North's government is still stable, but now the British have a lot fewer units to work with on the whole, and there's not much. Like, Burgoyne's going to have to come back and pick up these Haitians just to protect the British that are already there. Basically, if the British lose 5 more British regular steps, Lord North government will fall, and that will be essentially the end of the game. And I think the Americans could stick it out. They just need to pick their target and then uh, hammer the British that exist into submission. Though it will be interesting to see if the Americans can keep from collapsing. So, I for a while there, I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if the British can win." I think they need to bank on economic collapse, and they're doing what they can to force that, but it is getting more difficult over time. We may just need to leverage other advantages at our disposal to continue to cause problems for the Americans. Americans are just doing what they can to stay alive, and where they can reclaim ports that were lost, and keep up with what they can keep up with, I guess. So we'll go into the summer turn, and we'll play through that, and we'll come back and show what's up. Okay, here we are at the start of the second summer turn. I've got the reinforcements out for this, but just to kind of show. Continue to holding New York as the British not able to get this guy off his butt. There's no leader in New York itself right now. We do still hold Elizabethtown. And over here, I mean, the Americans have kind of consolidated control over Northern Virginia, and, Cornwallis still holds Baltimore, and he just got some more reinforcements to hold steady, but it's kind of a perilous thing for him right now. Um, in the north, things remain stable. The British don't have much gas to push in the north. Their one leader here is such high ranked that I can't let him enter any civilized area down here. So at most, he could push on, fight Fort Ticonderoga, but even then, I don't think it would be of much value. At this point, he'd probably just get defeated. Here, Arnold grabbed some guys and raced south and managed to take Portsmouth from the British. So now that's just raided instead of occupied, and New Hampshire is liberated. Well, they were never really conquered, but now he's got his eye on Maine if he can get over there. Um, the Americans, via Howe, did try to take Providence back, but failed to do so. Burgoyne is still holding out there, and they still have control of Newport. So that'll be an impact on the economic situation here. And then generally, further down south, we've not seen a whole lot change other than some attempts that with this stack that could activate, but we're just not getting very many places. Again, the lack of leaders is definitely hurting. We have one backup British leader with Burgoyne just to cover us if we lost a leader. It's good to have spare leaders, but we're going to need to redeploy somebody down here to take control of the stack, or we're not going to make any more progress in the south at this rate. It's just not going to work. And in fact, on defense, the Americans definitely outnumber the factors of these mercenaries. On attack, they don't, but on defense, they do. So we definitely need something to happen if the British are going to make any more progress in the south. If we could activate, we would definitely try to drop another British stack in a port, but I can't seem to activate anybody. If Cornwallis leaves Baltimore, we'll lose Baltimore as the British. So I need to get something out of New York probably, or get this guy off his butt. He activates on a freaking 2 to come down and start something down here. That's kind of the best path for them. In terms of eliminated British steps, let's see, I need to get this where I can count it better. If you have them stacked up in sets of 2s, then you're kind of good to go. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34. Okay, so we, as the British, can lose one more step of regulars, and Lord North's government is going to fall. And there's a couple right here that are for easy picking. So I almost want to say this is going to be game here very shortly. But we'll see. We'll play through at least through this next turn here, and we'll see what happens. Again, the Americans, I believe, just need to get one more regular step loss, and that's it. And I think they can easily get that in a number of places across the board. So let me go take care of that. Okay, hey guys, we're just finishing the summer turn, turn 21, which means like in terms of turns, we're kind of like halfway through the game. But the Americans have won. They have won the game. So you can see Washington went up on a cleanup job off in the Delaware Peninsula, or whatever we call this. I don't remember. And sort of liberated some space, and ends up like we don't have to take any other activations. We don't have to do anything else. We can just simply stop. And at the end of this turn, we would find that we have, and I miscounted. I think I miscounted before, but I recounted now that we lost some more units. All this together is 36 steps of British regulars, and I'm just going to walk us all over to the rulebook. The British player, blah, 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 or if any turn ends with at least 35 steps of eliminated British regular units, Lord North's government has fallen. When counting steps, blah, 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 you basically have to count if they're completely removed. If Lord North's government falls, the American player is declared the victor. So that's it, guys. We did it as the Americans. We did it ahead of schedule. We did it in 1778, summer of 1778. The government of Lord North falls. The Americans have won their independence. And if we look at the overall situation, the British had control of Georgia, but never quite made it back into Charleston. They had held Charleston for a time. They lost it, and they could not get it back. They were trying to make some inroads in the rest of the Carolinas, but not enough to make any major difference. Uh, Cornwallis sits in Baltimore with still a fairly potent stack, but could do no more, and not enough to totally flip the game over. And I mean, I guess technically, oh no, because this is part of Maryland. We were damn close to having. I mean, I think during several parts of the turn, the Maryland colony was under British restoration, but um, he sits sort of, a little bit isolated, a little bummed out. We never saw the French fleet come on, by the way. Philadelphia remained stacked and safe for much of the game. New York remained a stronghold of the British, and they kind of used that where they could. There was raiding through Connecticut. Uh, the British were sort of held up in Providence, and were fairly well dug in there in Newport as well. We maybe would have seen the fall of Maine back to the Americans if Arnold was to go again, but we didn't need to do that. There was no need to continue fighting. So there was definitely, I guess, in terms of the coast, like the British had some strongholds. If they had maintained that, it would have been much better. If we kind of fast forwarded to the end of the year, and let's just say, for instance, that like nothing changed, because the British were going to get some reinforcements. They were going to get these guys. They were going to get some provincials. They were going to get another leader back he was hurt. He was actually wounded, so he was coming back from being wounded. Um, maybe they do something to hold on there, and we were going to roll for economic collapse. Well, we would have, two, three, 5, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 15, and divided by 5, that's a +3. -2 for French entry is a +1 to the die roll, and we would have gotten a 6. That actually would have meant we had near economic collapse, and then we would have lost on the board a bunch of American units permanently, and probably have had a bunch of other issues. Right, near economic collapse means we have to withdraw a bunch of units, um, and about 50% of the Continental Army. So where it felt like the British were starting to get just outnumbered in terms of combat power that could be brought to bear. Um, at the end of the day, near economic collapse was about to happen. Like it was going to happen potentially this season with that die roll. There was a reasonable chance of happening, and it very likely would have with that +1. I rolled a 5, but okay, I could have rolled a 1 or a 2. It might not have mattered. So it was kind of close to economic collapse. I think the British did a pretty good job of getting into some of these important ports, but it just wasn't enough because they had just simply lost too many units. I had played not smart up here, and then even down here. I basically I should never have gone out this far. I mean, my thought was I'd come out and then start sweeping up the other side of the state, but that was silly. That was very dumb. I should not have done that. I should have kept a concentrated force. The other mistake I made is I have this big stack of mercenaries, right? Stupid, stupid, Steve, because that is a huge number of steps that could have been absorbing regular losses. The fact that I have these stacks over here with no cushion is just silly, dumb, 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 Steve. So, like, this idea, like, oh, I'm going to have this dedicated mercenary stack to go into the south and help out. No, I should not have done that. There should be like, these six or this large number of mercenaries should be spread out as much as possible across as many stacks of British regulars as I can handle, so that was stupid. So here's my assessment, guys. I think this game should have been a lot closer than it was, but I played the British very dumb. So here's what I think I'm going to try to do. Excuse me. I think I'm going to start over. That's right. I'm going to start over, and or maybe I should do one of the later scenarios. I'll have to decide that, guys, off camera. I've got to think it through. It might be fun to set up like a later scenario and play it through just so the board is in a little more historical state in 1776 or 1777, and then we can play from there. But I think I've got another one in me. One, because I feel so bad I fouled up as the British, and I just made some really dumb mistakes that should not have really happened. And I am actually having a lot of fun with this. I don't know if that's coming through when I describe things, but I definitely am getting a feel for the system, and I'm feeling a little bit better about like how to look at the units that are coming onto the board and managing uh, the reinforcements and how to sort of make progress as the British, how to make progress as the Americans, even, and just in terms of what you need to do. I'm getting a better sense of that, and I would feel bummed if this was the only attempt I made at the American Revolutionary War scenario, because I've learned so much in the process of stubbing my toe and face into the brick wall here with the game. Um, but my general assessment is this has been pretty fun. Um, it is so much more involved than every other. Like the French and Indian War is like kindergarten compared to this. There's so much more going on, so much more to think about. So many times where I needed to make better use of some of the American rifle units, and I just did not do that. Um, there's just a whole set of things like that I think I have a much better understanding of, and I think I would do a much better job in a retry. And I need to get a little more organized because I'm just all over the place with counters. I need to figure out a better way to stay organized. I think Tom has some helper sheets. Might take up more table space, but I got a little extra to work with. So I think I want to take another swing at things. I just need to pick the format of that. But generally, I did like my time with this. This is fun. I think it's a bit involved and it is fiddly, and I think I'm getting better at like quick counting the counters for combat. I do need to keep using little sheets of paper to help me remember, what I just counted because I'm about to start counting a whole other stack, for combat and stuff. I think that's a little fiddly. I think you can't escape that here. I think the fact that like I'm having to flip through a lot of these stacks looking for something to withdraw on certain turns is a little fiddly. That's going to be like the valid criticism is, oh, this is a little fiddly. You got to fiddle around with the counters. You got to look for stuff. But in terms of the actual gameplay, like it's entertaining. It's fun to kind of see what happens and the craziness that happens. Like if your leader dies or gets captured or whatever, like now that stack is in a huge amount of danger sometimes. Um, and seeing Arnold go off on little missions because he's an excellent leader. While you have him, he can do a lot of damage. Like all this stuff is coming together. It's just really interesting. I think as the British, I also got screwed up coming down here where Cornwallis kind of got trapped. Was like not trapped, but he couldn't do as much, which is why he took ferries to Baltimore. Um, I think there's just a different path that I should have taken with those guys. It is very tough. Like you need to get into New York as the British. I think you just have to do it because it's the source of so many replacements in other units. So you need to do it. And I think early when you're navigating Boston, it's coming down to like you need to stick around in Boston for a while because you don't want to give free units to the Americans because they get reinforcements in Boston. But you eventually just got to go because the Americans are going to concentrate enough force that they'll start attriting you away. So you do just have to pick a time to leave. And if you just do it on the historical schedule, that's probably fine. But either way, yes, you definitely do need to come into you need to come into New York and you need to capture it one way or the other. And then figure out how to send units out of New York. Like use New York as your base, obviously, and then figure out like where can you do other naval invasions, taking units from New York, picking your strike force, and then dropping them where they're going to go. And what's really the other thing I learned is that, you gotta have to look at the counter mix and see which of these American units. Let's see if I can get like this guy's got, you can barely see it, but he's got a boxed entry number on 3319, right? So you kind of have to know, like, okay, if I look at 3319, and Arnold is there right now. So 3319, if you capture that as the British, you just need to make sure you leave enough of a garrison so that when these guys pop up, no matter what, with their, effectively, 4-2 combat power, that they'll simply like just be auto destroyed. So you kind of have to look at that, and I think there's a certain artistry for the British to figure out like, okay, if you want to completely shut down a front, you're going to need to leave some guys behind in the city, in the port, right? You want to keep the port occupied. You got to occupy these supply hexes. If that hex has units that are going to reinforce no matter what and cause a combat, you're going to need to leave enough behind to guarantee you're not, impacted by that. And then figure out like how else you're going to cover similar entry hexes like this that may have auto entry units. And there's some, somewhere I may have that are like that. So you start looking at these spots and you're like, okay, I need to leave enough behind. And if you leave stuff behind, that limits your ability to continue moving forward. So like this whole area in New England feels like, you want to work around the coast until you get into Hartford and New Haven. And then you can kind of start maybe pushing north, or, I guess if we're like, northwest, um, to take the supply hexes, to take the reinforcement hexes. You can probably get to a point where you can shut down all these states, but your operating army may be weak, which is why you need to be coming down Lake Champlain in a safe way. And then you can kind of roll up New York, and then you can start, creating a crunch. But I think in the course of the game, I just didn't get there. I didn't activate enough. The British leaders are always a concern for activation for many of them, except for like Cornwallis, Burgoyne, and a couple others that are pretty good. So there's definitely a strategy, I think, for the British that I discovered as I played, and by the time I really realized the best way to operate, as I saw all these entry hexes and how often stuff came up there, I couldn't put it to good effect. Just keeping in mind, like if you leave these empty, and there are regular continental units or whatever, like they'll come back every spring. They'll just come back, and you can see there's all these units that came in as reinforcements that I didn't even have time to go pick up. with a leader. They're just out there. They're out there to be annoying so that if the British are going to exit New York, they have to navigate around these guys or fight them and maybe get stalled. So it's almost not even a bad thing to have these, like a lot of these American units, just kind of coming in all over the place because they're just little obstacles for the British to operate in and kind of see we got this whole area kind of cleared out because we did use leaders to grab units and form stacks and conduct some combats. Um, at various points, I needed to try to get a unit into here while it was empty, and I never did, which was kind of a bummer. Um, yeah, so I think there's a lot in here that I need to pick at some more, and I just, like I said, I've genuinely had a good time with this. I do like it. Um, I think out of all the scenarios, this one is definitely the most engaging. Like it's got uh, it's like a totally different game ultimately. Like all the other scenarios are little puzzles and experiments. Even the French and Indian War is not terribly complicated at all. This is just a whole other monster. But there's so much to it that comes into play. You're trying to make sure you've got a good stack with cavalry for evasion or reaction movement. You want the artillery. If you're thinking through where you're putting your artillery, I mean, there's just a lot of elements in here that are a lot of fun. So there you go, guys. That is the 1778 turn American victory. We have our independence. That's awesome, and I hope soon I'm going to have to you either a I don't know what I would call it, ARW Take Two, or maybe we'll do a different scenario. I'll figure that out. But hope you guys liked watching this. Again, I had some fun with this scenario. It was a lot of interesting concerns and elements and push and pull. It was good. I want to do something with it here again. We'll see you in the next video, guys, when I get to that. Sorry the cam's shaky. I'm just going freehand so I can pan really easy. We'll see you in the next one, guys. Hope you like this video. We'll catch you later. Take care. Keep gaming.